Welcome along to video number 79. What we're going to look at today is a little bit of VBA, and it's something that's incredibly useful as a time-saving trick. You can use Excel to send emails for you automatically to athletes or coaches or whoever you need to do it to. So I'm going to give you a little example here. Let's ignore the fact that this is a very simple report. We simply are able to, for example, select a date in this cell here. As a result of that date, the subsequent 6 days are also automatically selected. Some numbers are extracted from this master table on the left, and there's a little bit of a chart drawn below. Now, the reason this report is so brief is that the intention is that you can send it to an athlete's phone, and so they can open an email on their phone and there'll be a PDF of this report, and they can open it up and see just a little summary of today's training or this week's training or this match's statistics, for example, and that can be quite useful. I know one of the real attractions of using apps for training monitoring is that ability to get information to athletes quickly, and they can be using their phones, which is what young people like to do. So just to take you through the process, by clicking this button on the right here, what will happen is that Excel will create a report for all of these athletes here. There's 13 of them. It will send them all an email. I've just put in 2 email addresses all the way down, so a whole bunch of emails will come through to the same email account, and a PDF of the report will be put into this folder. So let's have a look at that now. I have an empty folder called 7-Day Reports, and that can be found on a very simple file path just inside Documents for this PC. So if we go back to the Excel file, we'll see here that that file path has been manually typed in. A common trip up is that there's no backslash at the end. When people are trying to replicate this, they forget that last backslash. So if you're having troubles, check that out. If I go across to my Outlook, we can see here that there's no emails there waiting for us. I've chosen a date, the 1st of February, and I'm going to hit this play button now. Excel is now looping through. You can see the wheel spinning, and I can now quickly go to my Outlook, and what we'll see is that half a dozen of these reports are going to be coming in every second or two. That is nicely set up for our athlete. It's got a very simple title. So if I open up this email, I can see that it's come from Excel Tricks for Sports. The title of the email says 7-Day Training Load Update 07/02/2016. There's a little message that says, "Hi Amy, attached is the report from the last 7 days," and a small PDF which, when you open up, simply has that report that we just looked at previously. And so it's only taking up about half a page, if that, and so therefore it's possible to be viewed quite nicely on the smartphone of the athlete. And here back in my Outlook inbox, we can see that there are the several emails that were sent through to this particular address here. So how do we do that? The process is relatively simple. It requires VBA. It's going to loop through each of these names, and for each of these people it's going to paste their name into this box here. As soon as the name is selected in this box, the data updates. A PDF is created of this print area, saved to the folder, attached to an email and sent. Then it goes back to the next person in the list and continues that looping process. So the process requires 2 steps. The first step is to build the report. We'll do that quickly. The second step is the VBA part. I have my data table on the left, and I now need to fill in formulas into this table to make it populate. And so the first one is relatively easy. We want to have a drop-down box here of the athletes' names. If I go to my control panel sheet, we've got a list of names. If I select these names, you can see I've already given it a name, list names. So I go to my data sheet, data validation, list, hit the F3 button, and I can see that I've got something called list names. So that's that part done. I can choose an athlete. Next part, this is just a manual entry. You can create a drop-down list, but my experience is that it's just as easy to allow people to type a date in here. So we've got all sorts of dates in here. Let's just choose one. 10th of the 1st, 2016. I've got a custom date format. If you don't know how to do that, type a date in. You can see up the top, it's still reading it as 10th of the 1st, 2016. It's just representing it in a different way to make it perfectly clear to anyone reading it that it's Sunday the 10th of January. So with the cell selected, Control 1 opens up the Format Cells tab. In Custom, you can type anything you like. And I'm going to delete it out. If I type day, day, month, month, year, 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 we can see what the sample looks like. If I change that to MMM, so that's 3 M's, it'll use an abbreviated text version of the month. If I put a 4th M, it'll put the entire month in there for me. I could take out the slash and put a dash, which is what I actually prefer. And before the initial double D, I could put 1, 2, 3, 4 D's in there and a dash. So it's going to put day, day, month, year. Now that can get quite big, so I'm just going to cut that month down to an abbreviated version. So I've got that now in place. I can format painter that all the way down for my other dates, and they'll be exactly the same now. A date is just a number, so if I click on the date and add 1, it just adds a single day. Drag that down, and we've got consecutive days now. If you've got the possibility of duplicate rows in your data set, for example, an athlete forgot and filled in their data twice, or you forgot and you accidentally put their data in twice, then you might think twice about how to do this formula. I'm working on the assumption that there's only one row per day per athlete, and so that makes the aggregation formula pretty easy. All I have to do in this particular case is a SUMIFS. What does SUMIFS do? It does the sum of a range based upon your criteria. I've got 2 criteria. One is date and one is athlete name. My table is called TBL data, and on a PC, if I hit the square bracket, it shows me all the field headings, all the column headings. So I'm looking to calculate RPE. My first criteria is name. Once I've selected that field, click on the athlete name, the selection box up the top there in cell I5. If you hit the F4 key on a PC, it locks that down. My second criteria with the square bracket looks at the date column, and the date that I want to get at is actually being obscured now by my formula. So I'm going to click below and just use my arrow key to go up. The F4 key can be toggled. It's got 4 options. The option that I want to choose is to lock the column number, but not the row number. close bracket at the end, and hit enter. If I drag this down, I get the RPE for all of those days. Now when you do table referencing, if I drag this to the right, what it'll do is it'll move across these field headings to the right as well. And there is a way to stop that, but it makes the formula quite unwieldy. So what I'm going to do is just scoop the formula out of the formula bar and paste it in next door. And while I've got it on the clipboard, I'm going to paste it to the other 3 columns as well. And now for duration, all I have to do is take out RPE. When I do so, the field list appears again, and I can just choose duration and hit enter. Same thing here, I can choose load and hit enter. And last of all, wellness, and hit enter. Now that I've done that, I can grab all 3 of them and copy them down. Average RPE is the only thing you want to see here. Sum of RPE wouldn't make a lot of sense, so the same thing applies to wellness. What was the average wellness of the week? Copy and paste that across. If I do drag this one across, it does save me a little bit of hassle. I can simply overtype average and put sum. I think the decimal place is unnecessary here, so I'm going to take that away. This is not necessarily a part of this tutorial, but I'm just going to quickly do the 7-day and 28-day reference here. Now to do so, I probably would be sensible to change the date. So I'm going to change that to the 1st of February. That way there's actually a month of previous data that I can reference against. Now to calculate the 7-day reference, I can use average ifs. RPE is my average range, and I now have a few criteria to put in. I've got 3 in this particular case. The most obvious one is athlete name. So we can do that one already because we did that higher up in the table, and we should be comfortable with that. Next one's a little bit more difficult. It's leveraging off date, and the criteria needs to be in quotes. It needs to be greater than or equal to this date, lock it down with the F4 key, -7. And I need to repeat that for another criteria. It needs to be less than this date as well. So if I close that off, I get a number that tells us the 7-day reference period. If I drag that down with just a simple edit, I can change that to a 28-day reference period. And so that's working pretty well. And if I scoop that out, and I paste it in over here, to make it work, all I have to do is change the field name on the average range. Drag it down, change 7 to 28, and I've got 2 columns sorted out. If I scoop that out, paste it in the duration column and also the load column. I can go in and make some edits. The first thing I need to do is change it to SUMIFs rather than average ifs. The syntax of the formula is the same, so you don't really have to do too much editing other than this. The obvious thing to change is to get the correct field. Do the same thing here. Change it to a SUMIFs. Change from RPE to load, and you're good to go. Drag them down. Change 7 to 28. And things are looking alright. My suggestion would be is to actually divide that by 4, so you got things on the same scale. Where you might get into difficulty with this method is if you haven't got complete training weeks in the previous 28 days. When this happens, the 28-day reference number will be a little bit skewed and won't really give you what you're looking for, but you can have a play around with that sort of stuff. A simple graphic is what we had previously, so I'm simply going to grab this data and insert a chart, and we can do some editing of that. Almost fits inside. I'm going to drag it across to load because that's what I'm more interested in. I've made a mistake with my selection, but it's very easy in Excel to just drag that up and get it right. I've got a problem now because my date formats were good in the table but not so good in the chart. They're taking far too much space up. Just like previously, I can have a custom code, and in this case I actually just want day, day, month, month, because that's pretty useful now. It means that the axis labels don't take up a huge part of the chart. If I right click and choose select data, let's get our second series on here. Overlaying wellness on the top of this is something that I think is a good fit. It doesn't initially look that good because the scale of the data is so different, so I usually choose change series chart type, and I plot it on a secondary axis as a line. Format the bars. Something I also like is to change that to a much smaller number, such as 50%. Just makes those bars a little bit bigger and a little bit easier to read, in my opinion. We can leave it like that. I think there's no need to go crazy with it. I'm just going to quickly add in some chart labels and a chart title like that. So we've now got our report working. If I select a different athlete, we can see that it updates and it's working okay. So that's the report building part, relatively similar to a number of my other tutorials, so hopefully that was something easy enough to understand. The last little part which I didn't cover is that I simply selected those cells, went to the page layout tab and clicked set print area. And we can check it out and see what it looks like. We want it to be pretty easy to see in the top left side of a page so that if you open it on a phone, it looks okay. So that's the easy bit. The hard bit is the VBA. If you go to Google and you type in Excel VBA, send emails from Excel, you'll get a variety of code snippets that you can use, and that's what I've done. I haven't written this from scratch myself. I've just pasted it in and I've edited things. So there's a whole lot of variables at the start, and it's easy to get scared by that, but basically what's happening is that we're defining some variables, we're creating a PDF and saving it with a file name. we're closing that PDF and attaching it to an email, and it's looping through that process several times. The real key part of this, well, there's two key parts. The first bit is shown here. This is the creation of the PDF file. And there's one critical thing that you need to be able to tell Excel before you can create that PDF, and that is, what is the file name and what is the file path? And so that's what I've defined above here. Where are we saving it and what are we calling it for each athlete? And so I've used variables that for every row in that list, it's simply reassigning the new name to the variable athlete and looping through the rest of the process. The last part of this VBA and the last part of the loop is that it has to create a connection to Outlook. So that's a critical thing to understand before you try this out yourself. This requires that you are using Microsoft Excel on a PC and Microsoft Outlook on a PC. There are ways you can do it on a Mac. It's a little bit more complicated, and I suggest that you Google this particular person. He works very hard to offer advice around how to accomplish these tasks on a Mac. So check out his site and you'll find some really good stuff there if you're a Mac user. But on the PC, the connection to Outlook is very easy. You can see the different parts of the email. Who's it being sent to? Well, that information is being found in column 3 of our lookup table. That's the email address. I could CC to someone else, such as a coach if I wanted to. I've got the subject line. It's saying 7-day training load update. Why don't I add something in here? The next thing is I've just got a little simple message in the body of the email, and it simply says hi, puts the athlete's first name in, and then says attached is the report from the last 7 days. And it's as simply as adding more text to that. I just put well done on there. Finally, the key bit is we attach the file, and it's remembered the full file name because we define that. The full file name is the file name plus the folder path. And once it attaches it, sends the email off, and it's done. Down here where it says send, I could also say open. If I put a comment in front of send, it'll no longer send it. It'll simply open the email with the PDF attached, waiting for you to click send. A lot of people prefer this option because it allows them to write a personal message to that athlete, make another attachment, or even just check that the file is the correct file. Certainly in the early stages of using a tool like this, you do want to be cautious about what you're sending out. So I'm just going to leave that in there. When something is green, it means that it doesn't execute. So it's still set up to send immediately. There's a little bit of error protection. The last line is simply next I, which means go to the next row. Let's go back to our file. Let's click the button. We can see the wheel turning. I can go to Outlook and I can watch the files come in. So those files have come through. We can open one of them and we can see that it's got what we put in there, the extra little well done we put on the end, and the from Excel part in the subject line. I haven't really taught you too much about how to write the code. I think the best thing you can do is copy and paste this code into yours and try and muck around with it a bit. The key things that you'll need to change is where to find the reference data. And so for me, the reference data can be found on either sheet 1 or sheet 2, and so I've referenced that inside. I've defined my dates to be in cell I14, the storage folder information to be in cell F3, and so on. So you need to check those values and make sure you've got the right cell references for your particular information. If you do that with a few goes at this, you should be able to get it to work. Hopefully what this demonstrates is more and more the power of a free tool like Excel to accomplish some pretty sophisticated tasks. Training monitoring is a real hot topic right now, and one of the weaknesses that people talk about with Excel is the inability to pull athletes and coaches into the process and give them live updates. This demonstrates that you can do it. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good, and with a little bit of tweaking you could be sending this off within minutes of the athletes finishing a training session if you can load in their RPEs, durations and wellness scores into your spreadsheet and click the button. I've done this on a scale of 500 or 600 recipients, and it works great. Your Outlook's sending a whole lot of mail, but in the space of about 2 minutes I was able to send 600 emails with reports to particular clients of mine. If you're interested in VBA tricks like this, then stay tuned, because I plan to do the next 2 or 3 videos using VBA. There's also a VBA module in my course which is around Excel tricks for S&Cs, which you might want to have a look at if you get a chance. There's a link in the description below and a discount coupon in play for the next little while. If you want a copy of this file, then feel free to send me an email and I'll happily send it through to you. Thanks for listening.